I worked in a quiet corner of South Carolina, in a place most people wouldn't even notice driving past. It was a public library, nestled between two old storefronts, one of them long abandoned, and a half-collapsed post office that had survived 3 hurricanes and at least 1 roof fire. The library itself was the oldest building on the street. Originally a courthouse in the 1930s, before it was converted sometime in the late 50s. Locals called it the Kellerman Library, named after Judge Emmett Kellerman, a man with a stern stare, immortalized in a portrait that still hung behind the main circulation desk. People joked his eyes followed you as you moved through the stacks. I used to laugh at that too. Used to. I started there in 2016, fresh out of community college and in need of any job that didn't involve waiting tables. I liked the stillness of libraries. I liked order. And the Kellerman Library had that in spades. Neat rows, strict cataloging, rules, and a cozy old paper smell that soaked into your clothes by the end of the day. But that stillness, ... It turned into something else over time. Something I still can't explain. It started in late September always, the quietest time of year for us. The summer reading programs were done. School was back in session, and people weren't yet panicking about holiday book rentals. I was on evening shifts, usually alone from 6 p.m. until closing at 9. Just me and the books. The first night, I noticed something odd. I was working upstairs in the reference wing. That floor was mostly historical archives, bound newspaper collections, and stacks of outdated encyclopedias no one touched anymore. You could go an entire week without seeing a single visitor up there. That evening, I was pushing a cart toward Stack, a 3-a-narrow, shadowy corridor lined with local history volumes and dusty boxes of old city records. The overhead lights flickered slightly when I passed beneath them, but that wasn't unusual. The wiring was ancient, and maintenance barely touched the second floor unless something was actively on fire. As I began shelving books alphabetically by county name, I heard something, a whisper, not like a draft or a creaking floorboard. This was unmistakably a voice, low, wet-sounding, almost like someone muttering into their cupped hand. I paused, the spine of a thick ledger still in my fingers. I turned my head slowly. Nothing, just the end of the row. I stood perfectly still and listened. And again it came. ... Not yet ... That's what it sounded like. Just barely audible ... Not yet ... I whispered, hello. Even though I felt ridiculous. The silence that followed was thicker than before. I stared down the row of books, waiting for movement. None came. No footsteps. No doors. Just the hollow drone of the ancient ventilation system. I didn't shelve the rest of the books that night. Over the next few weeks, Staka 3 became a spot I avoided. I didn't tell anyone. It seemed silly embarrassing, even. I mean, it was just one shelf in a dusty, old building. But there was something wrong with the air near that row. Colder. Not a sea. Cold. Dead cold. You'd walk by and feel it on your skin like passing through breath that didn't belong to you. The whispering came back. Every time I passed stack A3, I'd hear it, always barely audible. Sometimes a phrase. Sometimes just syllables or fragmented speech. One night, I leaned in, trying to hear it better, and it stopped. Not faded, stopped. Like it knew I was trying to listen. From then on, it started to change. One Friday evening in October, just before closing, I heard something that made me drop an entire stack of books. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was breathing, loud, raspy, shuddering inhalations, coming from the other side of the shelf while I was at the very end of the row. I froze. My palms went sweaty instantly, and I remember I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The breathing went on for maybe 10 seconds slow, deliberate. Each inhale sounding like it came through a throat lined with water. Then it stopped and was replaced by something far worse. A single knock. From the other side of the shelf, right at head level. I didn't even think. I ran. I abandoned the cart, the books, everything. I didn't stop until I was downstairs and back behind the front desk. And even then, I felt something was watching me from the mezzanine above. I didn't clean up. I just locked up early and left. I started getting dreams after that, not nightmares. Exactly, more like fragmented memories of the library. But everything in them was wrong. The lights would be flickering endlessly. Books would be stacked in impossible formations. And the whispering from stack A3 would be echoing through the halls in one dream. I found myself standing in the A3 row, but the floor had rotted out, revealing a dark, brick-tin stairwell that didn't exist in real life. In another, every book I pulled from that shelf was blank-checked for the phrase, "I see you," written over and over again in shaky pencil. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. It all came to a head on Halloween. We were open late for a children's costume reading event, so I wasn't alone that night. Parents, kids, volunteers. It should have felt safer, but it didn't. Around 8:30 p.m., after the reading was done and the last family had trickled out, I noticed that the upstairs lights were flickering again. Nothing new, but then I saw someone. Just a glimpse, a figure at the very end of stack A3. I was at the circulation desk, about 40 feet from the mezzanine stairs. I looked up casually and saw a tall, thin shape step into the row and vanish from view. My stomach twisted. No one had gone upstairs. I was sure of it. And no one in the library had been tall, bald, and wearing something long and dark. The figure I saw didn't move like a person either. It sort of ... glided, too smooth, too fast. I radioed George, the custodian, who was doing trash out back. He came inside, confused, and followed me upstairs. I explained what I saw. He laughed. Stack A3. Seriously. Everyone around here knows not to go near it after dark. I blinked at him. What do you mean? Why? He looked uncomfortable. Ah, hell. You've been here a while. Guess you should know. According to George, there were rumors going back decades about the building's original purpose. Before it was a library, before it was even a courthouse, it had been a holding facility for the criminally insane. An understack, A3 beneath. That particular row was one of the sealed access hatches to the original underground cells. The kind they didn't talk about anymore. Most had been bricked over when the library was built. But not all. George didn't have more details. Said people who worked upstairs for too long started hearing things and eventually requested transfers or just quit without notice. One woman, an archivist in the 90s, had gone missing after her shift. Security footage just cut out. She was never found. That night, after George left, I went upstairs. Something pulled me there. Morbid curiosity, maybe. The lights flickered worse than usual. My footsteps echoed across the wood floor, like I was in a cathedral. I stood at the mouth of stack A3 and just ... stared. It was darker than it should have been. The back end of the row looked warped, like the shadows didn't align properly. The whispering had stopped again. I stepped forward. The air turned heavy, and I swear I could hear my own blood rushing. There was a smell, metallic, earthy, like rusted iron and wet wood. I reached out to the center shelf, and one of the books fell off. By itself, it landed spine up at my feet. An old, leather-bound ledger with no catalog sticker. I bent down and picked it up. There was no title. Just a single name inside the front cover, scrawled in faded ink, E. Kellerman. The judge. I opened the book. There were dates, names, locations, but no context. Just line after line of entries. October 3rd. Subject for a transfer to sub-level B. October 12th, screaming intensified. Removed tongue. October 15th, feeding unsuccessful. Sedation required. October 22nd, light sensitivity increasing. But it's too late. My hands started shaking. The air grew colder from behind me. I heard a whisper, loud, guttural. You read too far. I spun around. No one but the shelves. ... They had changed. Somehow, impossibly, stack A3 was longer. The hallway stretched further than physically possible. I could no longer see the exit behind me, just endless rows, and that whispering, now coming from inside the shelves. Books began falling. By one, thump, 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 and then silence, total, crushing silence. I blacked out. I must have. I woke up at the bottom of the mezzanine stairs, curled in a fetal position. My watch said 9:27 p.m. The lights were all off. The library was silent. I left without closing properly, drove home, shaking. I don't remember the drive. I never went back. I called in sick the next day, then quit over email. No explanation. I told my landlord I had to leave town and moved 3 states away within a week, but the dreams followed in every one. I'm standing in front of stack A3, and the whispering never stops. I used to work at a university library in Oregon, massive stone building from the 1920s. Covered in moss, with high vaulted windows and the constant smell of old wood and wet paper. Students called it the tomb, not because of anything sinister, just because it was always freezing and dead quiet inside. I was a night shift librarian assistant. It was a dull job, mostly restocking carts, checking returned books into the system, watching the security monitors, and trying not to fall asleep in the break room. We were open until midnight during exam weeks, so the place would still have stragglers at 11:30 p.m. Usually stressed out students clinging to their laptops like lifeboats. That was the year I met Moxa, co-worker who was, frankly, curious for his own good. Max was a history grad student who worked 2 nights a week at the library to help with tuition. Funny guy. Wore thick-rimmed glasses, always had a half-empty thermos of stale coffee, and spent most of his downtime obsessing over weird local legends. The guy was addicted to conspiracies, secret societies, occult symbols in the university's architecture. You name it, but the one thing he kept bringing up to me over and over was the so-called lost study room. The story goes that sometime in the 1960s, a student went missing inside the library. A girl named Evelyn. According to campus lore, she had booked a private study room late at night and was never seen again. The weird part. The booking system. Had her signed in at 10:15 p.m. and never signed out. But when campus police searched the building, the room she had reserved, room 6B, didn't exist. There was number 6th private study room in the cataloging system, and no room B in the layout at all. Only 5 rooms. Always had been. The university wrote it off as a clerical error, claimed Evelyn had probably left campus and run away, but Max didn't. By that, he swore there was a 6th room that no one was supposed to know about, a room that didn't show up until you were alone and looking for it. I laughed it off. Told him he watched too much YouTube. But I should have listened the first night. It really got weird. Max didn't show up for his shift. I texted him around 7 p.m. No reply by 8:30. I was shelving some medical textbooks on the 3rd floor when I saw something strange. The hallway where the private study rooms were just beyond the oversized dictionary collection was longer than usual. It was subtle, like an optical illusion. I stood at the corner, staring down the hallway, and counted 5 doors on the right, same as always. But at the very end was the 6th, room 6B. I blinked hard. I wasn't high. I wasn't tired. But there it was. Faint light bleeding from beneath the door. A plain black plaque on the wall. 6B. I should have turned away. But something about it, like a hook in the brain, drew me in. I walked slowly down the hall. As I passed the regular study rooms, I could hear the low hum of laptops and the faint clatter of keyboards. Normal stuff. But the 6th door was dead silent. I reached for the knob. My hand trembled. The instant my fingers touched the brass handle, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, nearly dropping it. It was a text from Max. Don't open it. No joke. That was it. Just those 3 words. I whipped around. The hallway behind me was completely empty. When I looked back toward the door, it was gone. Just a blank wall where it had been. Like it was never there. I left work early that night. Told my boss I was sick. I called Max 3 times. No answer. The next day, I found out he'd been reported missing. The university didn't do much. They claimed he must have left campus and gone home. That he'd recently dropped out of his grad program. But his roommates said all his stuff was still in his apartment. Laptop, keys, even his winter coat. And when I logged into the library's internal system, Max had booked a study room at 10:15 p.m. Room 6B. It wasn't listed anymore. But I found the record buried in a server log, time-stamped, verified, just like the Evelyn case from the 60s. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I spent the next week doing research. I combed through old floor plans of the library, looked at dusty schematics in the back of the maintenance office. Talked to a retired professor who used to work there in the 1970s. And I found something in the original blueprints. There was a small windowless room in the far southeast corner of the third floor, no door. No designation, just a rectangle with measurements 7 by 7 feet. It was right where 6B would have been when I showed the schematic to the facilities manager. He got real quiet, then asked where I found it. Hell. He locked the blueprint back in a drawer and told me never to bring it up again. He didn't deny it. I couldn't sleep after that. The more I thought about Max's text, "Don't open it," the more I realized he must have seen it too, that he'd gone in, that he never came out, and that it was my turn to see what was inside. The night I went back, it was raining. The campus was nearly empty. It was the week before winter break, and most students were already gone. The library was quiet, just me and a few undergrads buried in finals. I waited until 11:40 p.m. when the last group signed out. Then I took the service stairs up to the third floor. It looked normal. Same rows of dusty journals, same creaky tiles, but the hallway, ... longer again. Too long ... and at the very end, dimly lit, flickering, room 6B ... I walked toward it. The temperature dropped with every step. Not like air conditioning. This was cold, ancient cold, like a crypt. My breath fogged in front of me. I reached the door. It had no handle this time. Just a keyhole, and taped to it was a library request form ... in Max's handwriting. In case I don't come back. Folded inside the form was a key. 6B looked ... wrong. Not empty, just off. The walls were concrete, bare, but they shimmered slightly like heat waves. The air inside the room was dense, hard to breathe. The light bulb hanging overhead flickered constantly, but never fully illuminated the corners. There was a desk, a chair, a stack of books with no titles, and something else, something in the wall. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me on its own. I tried the handle. Nothing. No give. I pounded on the door. No sound came out. That's when I noticed it. A mirror on the far wall, but not a reflection. It showed Max. He was sitting at the desk, looking straight ahead, mouth open, eyes blank, like he was staring at something horrifying but frozen. I banged on the glass, screamed. His eyes twitched. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me and whispered one word: "Run." The light bulb exploded. The room plunged into darkness, and I felt it, something behind me, breathing. I don't remember how I got out. I woke up hours later in the staff bathroom, soaking wet, clothes covered in dust. Room 6B was gone again, but I never saw Max again, and every now and then, when I'm walking past the third-floor hallway during the day, I swear I see it. That extra door, waiting. I used to think that library drop boxes were just boring little chutes, nothing more than metal mail slots for overdue books. But after what happened during my night shift at the Granger Falls Public Library, I'll never look at them the same way again. This happened in 2021. I had just taken the job as a part-time clerk. The library was small, an old converted schoolhouse on the edge of a quiet Pennsylvania town. But during budget cuts, the town board voted to extend library hours on weekends, just one staff member, until 11 p.m., mainly to give students more time to study. I volunteered for Saturdays. The money wasn't great, but I needed the quiet. I was dealing with a lot back then, family stuff, a bad breakup, and this constant buzzing in my head that wouldn't go away unless I was surrounded by silence. For a while, those late nights were peaceful. A few people trickled in before 9. Then it was just me and the hum of the fluorescents. I'd re-shelve returns, wipe tables, run inventory reports. Easy work, but then, one Saturday night in late October, something strange came through the Dropbox. I was just about to close up, 10:54 p.m. on the dot. I had my coat on, lights off in most sections, and was logging off the front desk terminal when I heard the sound clunk. The metal flap of the outdoor book return chute snapped open. Then a soft thud, like something being tossed in. Nothing unusual. People dropped books in after hours all the time. But what struck me immediately was the sound that followed. A whisper, not the wind, not the pipes. A whisper, faint but distinct, like someone speaking right through the chute. It sent a chill down my spine. I stood frozen for a few seconds, then slowly approached the return bin, which was just behind the desk, tucked into a steel compartment beneath the counter. The bin was empty, or so I thought. Not a book, a cassette tape, old school. Black plastic, no label, just a strip of red tape over the real window. And handwritten on the side in shaky capital letters, "Do not play." I thought it was a prank. Maybe one of the local teens trying to be edgy. Still, I was curious. I hadn't seen a cassette tape in years. I took it to the back office, where we had an ancient stereo system we used for storytime music. Surprisingly, it had a tape deck. Curiosity got the better of me. I popped it in. For the first 30 seconds, it was just static. Then came the voice. It was a man's voice, raspy, terrified, whispering, "If you found this, I hope it's not too late. The library, it's not just books. It holds things, remembers things, and some of those things. Come back." I leaned closer. The voice trembled as he continued. It started after midnight. I was alone. I locked the doors. I turned off the lights, but she was already inside. Then the tape crackled violently, like it had been recorded through a storm, and the voice screamed, "Don't look at her face." The tape stopped. I sat there, stunned. It felt like ice had crept into the room. My hands were shaking. My skin prickled. Then I heard it again, clunk, another. Book had been dropped in. I ran out to check the chute. Nothing had been returned, but this time, the metal flap was open stuck-like. Something had pushed it from the inside. That's when I noticed the smell, like damp paper left in a basement for too long. Mold and dust and something else, ... sweet, like decayed flowers, and in the air, something. Even worse, whispers, dozens, layered over each other. Not audible like normal voices, more like the sense of something speaking behind your ear, just beyond hearing. I slammed the chute closed. It refused to budge. And then the lights in the main reading room turned back on by themselves. I crept out from behind the desk. Heart pounding, footsteps muffled by the carpet. The main room was glowing under those old, flickering fluorescents. Shelves standing tall like gravestones. Shadows twitching in the corners. And there, sitting at one of the reading tables, was a figure, motionless, not head down. I knew no one had come in. The doors were locked. I had checked, but someone was there. As I moved closer, I saw it was a woman, or at least the shape of one, wearing a tattered dress that looked waterlogged. Hair matted against her face. Hands pale and limp on the table. There was a book in front of her. One of ours. I recognized the barcode sticker, but that book had been checked out since 1997, and the name on the checkout record, Miriam Lowell. I know that name because there's a memorial plaque on the wall near the fiction section. She was a local woman who went missing 25 years ago. They found her car in the library parking lot. Doors locked. Purse still inside. She had come to return books late one night and never left. I stood there staring at the figure for what felt like minutes. Then slowly she turned her head. I didn't listen to the voice on the tape. I looked at her face. It WASN, single quote, ter. Right, it was mostly human, but collapsed in places. The skin sloughed like wet clay. Her eyes were hollow, filled with something pitch black that shimmered as it moved. Her mouth opened, but didn't shape words. Only sound, like water moving backward. I turned and ran, didn't stop until I was in the parking lot. The lights inside the building all shut off at once. I didn't go back to work after that night, told. Then I had COVID, then quit. A week later, the library director called me, told me a historic item had been returned after hours, one they didn't even know was missing. It was Miriam Lowell's library card, wrapped in a moldy piece of lace. Found in the drop box, stamped on the back was a return date, 11 o'clock. PM returned in full. There was no name attached, but I already knew who brought it back. I was never one to believe in hauntings, let alone the idea that a public library could house something unnatural. I used to think ghosts were for horror movies and urban legends, but I stopped laughing about that kind of thing after my 4th week working at the Whitlock Township Library. More specifically, after I opened the door no one was supposed to touch. The library itself was a modest building, nestled between a dentist's office and an abandoned Masonic lodge. It was old, built in the 1930s, the kind of place where everything creaked. The floors, the ceilings, even the handles on the bathroom faucets had a kind of metallic groan when you twisted them. I took the job after graduating college. During the worst of the hiring freeze, I didn't care where I worked, just needed something to keep me afloat. I had no idea that Whitlock's library was ... different, and no one warned me about the room. Behind the periodicals, my first 3 weeks were uneventful. Filing returns, helping seniors with computer printouts, and managing the occasional rowdy high schooler. Everyone was friendly, though the older staff had a weird, tight-lipped way of answering certain questions, especially when it came to the back left corner of the library. That area was always a little colder, quieter, even on busy days, and hidden behind the last aisle of magazines was a small wooden door, almost completely camouflaged by a dark bookcase and a potted plant. It had no signage, no knob, just a brass keyhole tarnished with time. No one ever went near it, but I noticed that every night the janitor would mop all the floors except the 5 feet around that door. He'd skip it completely, like it wasn't part of the building. One night I asked him about it. He froze, didn't answer, just made the sign of the cross and walked away. When I brought it up to my supervisor, Rachel, she gave me a strange smile and said, "That's the old microfiche storage. It's sealed. Don't worry about it." That should have been enough for me to leave it alone. But a week later, I found something strange in the returns bin. It was an overdue envelope, a sealed library, interdepartmental envelope, the kind used for archives or donation acknowledgments. The date written on the front was 1974. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed, brittle paper, typed, "Key returned. Recommend resealing room B immediately. She came out again last night. I don't know how long the tape will hold." No signature. No explanation, just that one sentence. "She came out again last night." I probably should have handed it to Rachel or tossed it in the shredder. Instead, I kept it in my locker. I started asking quiet questions: how old the building really was, what it used to be before it was a library. No one gave me clear answers, just vague references to renovations and the lower archive that was condemned decades ago. Condemned. Why would a part of a library be condemned? That night, I stayed late. I told Rachel I was finishing a deep inventory report. She left around 6 p.m., locking up the front entrance behind her, but I stayed in the darkened stacks, watching that little wooden door from between shelves, and at 7:22 p.m., I heard something, a faint, scratching sound, then 3 slow knocks from the other side of the door. I didn't imagine it. It was real. I approached slowly, phone flashlight on, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. And for the first time, I noticed that the brass keyhole had fresh scratches around it, like someone had recently tried to force it open. From the inside, the next day, I confronted Rachel. I showed her the envelope I found. She didn't get angry. She just looked tired, sat me down, and told me a version of the story she claimed wasn't technically on record. Back in the 1940s, library wasn't a library. It had been part of a temporary government psychiatric holding center. The facility was only operational for a few years before it was condemned due to incidents, her word, not mine. One of the patients, female, unregistered, had been locked in a sublevel room for observation after attacking a staff member. No one could figure out who she was or where she came from. She had no language, no records, only behaviors that terrified the staff. She'd mimic voices perfectly, cry like a child, whisper full conversations in tongues she was never taught. One night, during a thunderstorm, the facility lost power by morning. The girl was gone and the 2 orderlies assigned to the wing had been found in the room, mouths sewn shut with dental floss. The facility was shut down and repurposed years later, but Rachel said the room, what they now called Room B, was never actually destroyed. Just sealed, and beneath that wooden door was the original access hallway. I should have quit right then, but I did instead. I went online and ordered an antique skeleton key set, and the following Saturday, I stayed late again. The air near the door was cold. Not just temperature cold. Wrong. The kind of chill that feels like it's behind your eyes. Deep in your head, I tried 3 keys before the 4th clicked into place. The door creaked open about 6 inches, revealing a black void beyond. And with it came a smell earthy, damp and sweet, like rotting flowers and wet hair. I leaned in. With my phone flashlight, a descending staircase, steep and narrow, led into pitch black, and faintly, just barely, I heard something drifting up from below, humming like a lullaby sung by someone who never learned how to sing. I should have slammed the door shut and walked away, but something about the sound called me. I stepped inside, down the stairs, into the dark. I only made it halfway before my phone flashlight flickered, and then I saw her. She was at the bottom of the stairs, standing completely still, head tilted too far to the side, long arms dangling past her knees, and her mouth ... It wasn't moving, but I could still hear humming coming from behind me. I turned around, and there was nothing on the stairs, but the humming grew louder. Surrounding me, I turned back toward the bottom end. She was now standing on the step right in front of me, face pale and blank. But her eyes were my eyes, exact, like looking in a mirror. Only wrong, twisted at the edges, like her face was wearing me. I screamed and ran, tripped halfway up the stairs, slammed the door behind me, and I swear, before I locked it again, I heard a whisper in my voice say, "You shouldn't have opened the door." The next morning, I told Rachel everything. She didn't yell. She didn't even look surprised. She just handed me a roll of thick silver duct tape and told me to reseal the door. We didn't speak again. 2 weeks later, I quit, but I still hear humming sometimes, usually around 7:22 p.m., usually from behind locked doors, and sometimes I catch my reflection in a mirror only to realize it's not moving the same way I am. I didn't notice him the first few nights. Not consciously, at least, working. The closing shift at the Branford Civic Library wasn't exactly exciting. It was quiet, especially after 6 p.m. Most nights, I'd end up straightening DVDs, helping the occasional college student print off a late paper, and locking the side door, the high schoolers always propped open with a rock. But in my second week, I realized there was a man who always arrived around the same time. Mate, 04 p.m. Not a minute earlier. Not a second later. He looked like someone's aging uncle, faded gray suit, neatly combed hair, thin-rimmed glasses. Always carried a leather satchel tucked close to his chest. He never spoke, never checked anything out, just walked in, nodded politely, and made his way to the same table in the back left corner of the second floor. There, he'd take a single book from the shelf behind him, a thick, cloth-bound volume with no title, and begin to read. And he'd do that for exactly 50 minutes before standing up, replacing the book, and walking back out the front door every night. At first, I chalked it up to habit. People are creatures of routine, but something about this man felt off. I couldn't place it. Maybe it was how he moved, too precise, or the way he blinked only once every couple minutes. But mostly, it was the book that unsettled me. It didn't belong in our catalog. I searched every record, every ISBN database. Nothing. No barcode, no Dewey Decimal label, no publishing information. Just a thick gray volume with a black cloth spine. And every time I tried to sneak a glance at what he was reading, just from a distance, it was always the same page, same layout, same strange, cramped handwriting. Not English. Not even letters. Really. Just symbols, rows and rows of them, like someone had tried to copy runes from a dream. I finally asked my coworker, Brian, about him one night. Brian had worked there for 6 years, okay? He was blunt, borderline rude, and allergic to anything supernatural. Figured he'd brush it off. But when I described the man in the gray suit, Brian went pale, said he's still coming in. Like he thought the guy had stopped years ago. I asked what he meant, and Brian told me that he'd seen the same man back when he was an intern 9 years ago. And that even then, the guy looked exactly the same. Same suit, same routine, same book. Brian had tried to follow him out once, lost him in the parking lot within 5 seconds, said the guy vanished between 2 light poles, and the next morning, the camera footage showed nothing. No one walking in, no one walking out. Just a timestamp skipping 8:04 to 8:05. That was the first time I really began to feel afraid. I should have left it alone. Should have ignored him like the rest of the staff did. But the unknown eats at you, makes you itch in your brain. So I started watching him closer. From a distance, at first pretending to dust shelves, watching how his fingers moved across the page like he was tracing it from memory. Then I got bolder, snuck into the second floor after hours, took photos of the book, but every image came out blank, not corrupted, just empty. As if the camera didn't recognize there was anything in frame. Like the book wasn't real, or worse, was only real when he touched it. The turning point came on a Wednesday. I was on my dinner break, sitting near the back loading dock, when I saw the man standing near the alley. He wasn't doing anything, just staring up at the second floor windows, not blinking, not moving. His face was blank, but his eyes looked hungry, like he was remembering something or waiting. I backed away, heart pounding, and when I looked again, he was gone. That night, when he came in at 8:04, I followed him upstairs, kept a few paces back, staying quiet, watched him take the book, sit. I waited 10 minutes, then approached. He didn't look up, didn't even flinch as I sat across from him, up close. I could see that the book wasn't written in ink. The symbols shimmered, almost alive, like they pulsed faintly when I tried to read them. I asked, softly, "What is this?" He looked at me. For the first time, his eyes were empty, not blind, not cloudy, just wrong. Like they had depth, but no soul behind them. And he said, in a voice that didn't fit his face, "I'm reading your last thoughts." Then he smiled, turned the page, and every symbol on the next page looked like my handwriting. I stood up and backed away, heart hammering. He didn't follow, didn't say anything else, just kept reading. I called in sick the next 3 nights, didn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept checking my journals, my notepads, looking for signs that I'd written anything like those symbols. Nothing until I found the sticky note I'd left for myself on the fridge. It was blank when I looked in the morning, but that night the symbols were there, just faintly, like they were burning themselves into the paper, like they were spreading. I went back to the library that Friday with one Goldburn, that book. I didn't care what it was, who he was. I just wanted it gone. But when I arrived at 7:55 p.m., the table in the back was empty, and the book was already waiting for me. Open on the table, my handwriting. Across the pages, I turned to run, but standing at the top of the stairs was myself, wearing a gray suit, smiling, holding the leather satchel. That's when I passed out, when I came to. I was lying in the janitor's closet. Library closed. Hours gone. No one believed my story. Not Rachel. Not Brian, and the footage showed me talking to no one, just pacing the second floor, ranting to empty chairs. But the book was still there, and now I can't stop reading it every night at 8:04 p.m. Sit in the back left corner, trace symbols I've never learned, and wait, because someday soon, someone else will ask what I'm reading, and I'll smile, turn the page, and begin reading their last thoughts, too. I used to work overnight janitorial shifts at a historic library in upstate New York. The building dated back to the early 1900s and had gone through various renovations. But certain wings, especially the West Archive Hall, hadn't been touched in decades. Thick with the scent of mildew and brittle paper, that wing always carried an unshakable stillness. Like the air itself refused to move there. My shift began at 10 p.m. Usually, I worked alone. Most nights were uneventful, mopping floors, taking out trash, sanitizing desks. But some nights, things would happen that made me question what was real. The first time I noticed something strange was on a rainy Tuesday in November, around 3:30 a.m., while vacuuming the main reading room. I found a checkout slip on the front desk, printer dated that very night. I thought maybe one of the late shift librarians had processed a book through the system before leaving. But when I looked closer, the timestamp on the slip read exactly 3:33 a.m. The name on the slip: cardholder, unknown title, eyes through the keyhole, return date. Never. There was no barcode, no due date, no real catalog number. Just those 3 lines printed with chilling precision. I didn't even know the printer was still online. We hadn't used that system in months. It had been unplugged since the pandemic budget cuts. I double-checked the cord. It was still unplugged. I remember just staring at it for a long time, waiting for some rational explanation to form in my head. I told myself maybe I was overtired. Maybe I printed it by mistake somehow. But the more I stared at the slip, the colder I felt, like the heat had drained from my skin. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. But the next night, same thing. At exactly 3:33 a.m. Another slip. Different title this time. Cardholder, unknown title, 77 heartbeats, return date. When they stop, I heard the printer click behind me like it had just finished the job. I turned around immediately. It was still unplugged. This time, I didn't throw it out. I kept it, pocketed it. I had to show someone. I needed proof. But the weirdest part, when I got home and pulled it out of my jacket, it was blank. Same paper, same perforated edges, but nothing on it, like it had been printed with invisible ink. Or maybe the ink just vanished. I couldn't explain it. By the 4th night, I was jumpy. I'd stand by the printer between 3:30 and 3:34, watching, daring it to produce another slip. Nothing happened. But when I went to the trash bin, where I'd thrown the first one just to double-check, I found not one, but 7 identical checkout slips, all with different titles and timestamps, ranging from 2:59 a.m. to 3:59 a.m., all dated that same week. That shouldn't have been possible. I worked alone. There were no patrons. The circulation system had been disabled for months. I read each one: cardholder, unknown title, don't turn around. Return date, never cardholder, unknown. Title, the book that reads you, return date. It's still reading card holder. Unknown. Title: They're Coming Up the Stairs. Return date: You left the door unlocked. The list went on that night. Ended. I left around 4 a.m., heart pounding, every step echoing too loud in the quiet halls. The West Archive felt wrong as I passed it, like it had teeth. Like the shadows were leaning toward me. By the end of that week, I started locking the reading room door. I didn't care if I got in trouble. I wasn't going to stand near that desk anymore. I avoided that printer like it carried a virus, but the library didn't care about my fear. The next Friday night, our supervisor left a sticky note on my supply closet locker. Please fix or replace the front desk printer. Keep spitting out strange documents, getting complaints from staff. Looks like a glitch. A glitch dot. He thought it was a glitch. That night, the printer didn't wait until 3:33. It went off as soon as I clocked in 10:01 p.m. sharp. The checkout slip was already sitting there. Card holder, you title: This is your last night return date. Never. The door to the reading room closed behind me on its own. I ran. I didn't even grab my keys. I quit the next day. Didn't answer calls from HR. They eventually stopped reaching out. A year later, I got curious. I searched the library's online catalog from home, wondering if any of those creepy titles were in the public system. None of them were. But when I searched my own name in the patron registry just for the hell of it returned one hit. Account, active borrowed title, the story that ends when you do checked out. November 12th. Due date, unknown status, overdue, the worst part. That last checkout slip. It was dated one day in the future. Tomorrow, 3:33a.m. The library I worked in wasn't particularly large, 2 floors. Mostly glass walls on the front, and a cluster of private study rooms in the back hallway behind the circulation desk. I was a part-time library assistant during my college years. It was a quiet campus job, mostly shelving and scanning returns, occasionally helping students with a printer. I liked it. The atmosphere was peaceful until one night when I was scheduled for a closing shift with only one other employee, Samantha. She was in charge that night, locking the doors and powering down the lights. I handled the usual closing sweep, straightening books, clearing the study rooms, making sure no one had fallen asleep somewhere. It was protocol to knock on each private study room 10 minutes before closing. Most students complied. Occasionally, one would argue for more time, but we never left anyone behind. That night, though, I approached study room beyond, immediately noticed the light under the door. That was strange. I could have sworn I'd already checked that room earlier and found it empty. But maybe someone had slipped in while I was shelving near the fiction aisle. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I pulled out my master key and unlocked the door. It opened about 3 inches and then stayed, like something was blocking it. I pushed harder. It gave way, but only slightly. Inside, the lights were off, yet the glow from a small desk lamp flickered in the far corner. Just enough to reveal a figure seated, hunched over the desk, completely still. "Sir," I said. "Libraries closed." No response. He didn't even look up, just kept facing down toward the desk. I stepped in, just barely, my fingers gripping the edge of the door. "You'll need to pack up. We're closing now." Still nothing. I don't know why, but something about his stillness unnerved me. The way his shoulders sloped, the unnatural angle of his neck hit looked wrong, like he wasn't sitting, like he'd been placed there. I backed out, closed the door slowly, and locked it again. I walked straight over to Samantha. "There's someone in study room B," I said. She looked confused. "We checked all the rooms. That one was empty." "Well, it's not empty now." She followed me back, key already in hand. But when she opened the door fully, the room was empty. No lamp, no man, nothing, just 4 white walls, a table, 2 plastic chairs, and a faint smell of something damp, like wet soil. I didn't understand it. I hadn't even turned my back on the door. I stood there the whole time. He couldn't have left without passing me. I would have seen him. "Heard the door. You sure you saw someone?" she asked. I just nodded. She gave me a skeptical look and closed the door. "Probably just tired," she said. But I wasn't tired, and I knew what I saw. The next day, I checked the room log. Students were required to reserve study rooms using their ID. I looked for anyone booked for study room B that night. Nothing. It had been unreserved the whole evening. That should have been the end of it. But then, a week later, it happened again. Same routine. I'm doing final rounds. I knock. No answer. I peek in. He's there. This time, the desk lamp wasn't flickering. It was just glowing steadily. Warm yellow light. Almost calming. But the man in it was the same man. Same posture. Same stillness. Like he'd never left. But I was positive no one had gone in that room the whole shift. I had a clear view from the help desk the entire night. I didn't call Samantha this time. I walked away. I didn't even lock the room. I just left it alone. I thought if I didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't escalate. That ignoring it would make it stop. But it didn't. A few days later, I was reshelving a cart of returned books when I heard the faint click of a door down the study hallway. It was well past 9 p.m. We closed in 5 minutes. I hadn't seen anyone use a room all night. I turned and saw it, study room, be wide open, the lamp glowing again. And this time, the man was standing back to me, his head tilted slightly as if listening. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. And then he slowly raised one arm, shoulder stiff, movement jerky like a puppet on strings, and pointed at the window to his right. I don't know why I looked. It was pitch black outside. Nothing but the parking lot, except there was someone standing out there just beyond the glass. Staring in, they weren't moving. Neither was he. They just stood, facing each other like statues, separated only by the pane of glass. I ran. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't finish my shift. I just clocked out and left. I started requesting only daytime shifts after that. A few weeks later, Samantha mentioned that another closing shift assistant saw a creepy guy in study room B, but couldn't find him afterward. That room's reputation spread quietly. Eventually, students stopped booking it. The library never made any announcements. Of course, but if you walk past study room B just after sunset, you might still see the faint glow of that flickering desk lamp. And if you're unlucky, you might catch a glimpse of him, or the thing he's always watching, outside. I worked the reference desk during a quiet winter break at our city's downtown library, a 6-story structure that dates back to the 1920s. Most of the public floors had been modernized, but the 4th floor housing, the historical archives, still felt ancient. Dim lighting, creaky hardwood floors, and row upon row of dusty catalog drawers no one used anymore. The whole place had this smell you load paper, glue, and something almost medicinal. I'd always hated going up there, even in broad daylight. My job was mostly digital now, helping patrons navigate our online catalog or request interlibrary loans. But during the holiday lull, we barely had visitors. Just the occasional elderly researcher or grad student buried in microfilm. Then, about halfway through my December shift cycle, something strange happened. It started with a catalog terminal. On the 4th floor. Yes, we still had a physical card catalog system. It was just a formality, but we kept it online, too accessible, via a single, dusty desktop against the wall beneath a bronze bust of the library's founder. I'd never seen anyone use it. Most people didn't even know it worked that day. I was walking past the terminal when I noticed something odd. The screen was on, and it was scrolling The terminal wasn't connected to the internet. It was a standalone system, no updates, no automation. And yet, one by one, the old catalog entries were flipping by on screen, slowly, rhythmically, like someone was using the arrow key. I assumed maybe a patron had left it running. I reached out to hit the escape key, but the moment I touched the mouse, the scrolling stopped. Dead center of the screen was a catalog card titled Unknown Entry, SR Collection. Restricted Shelf 42. There was no such thing as a Restricted Shelf 42. Not in our system. I typed in the shelf ID manually. The catalog responded, no result. Entry does not exist. When I backed out to the previous screen, the card was gone. It was replaced with the terminal's home screen. I figured it was a glitch. I should have let it go. But later that night, I had a dream dot in it. I was back on the 4th floor, except everything was wrong. The lights were flickering overhead like strobes. The shelves were taller, darker. They loomed over me like rusted iron towers. There was something moving between them, something too tall, dragging something behind it. In the dream, I ran. I don't remember waking up. But the next morning, I had a note in my inbox, sent from an internal terminal. There were no words, just a screenshot. It was the same catalog card I saw the day before. Unknown Entry, SR Collection, Restricted Shelf 42. Only this time, someone had typed a note in the description box. I see you. I reported it to my supervisor. They brushed it off. Probably someone messing around. We'll run a check. But when I pressed them, they got uncomfortable. Told me to stay off the 4th floor for a few days. That night, after hours, I stayed behind. I know, stupid, but I couldn't shake it. Around 10:30 p.m., I snuck up the back stairwell with a flashlight and my keycard. The security gates had already been locked, but I had access. The lights were dimmer than usual. Not off, but wrong. Like the bulbs had aged 50 years overnight. That sickly yellow hue that turns white paint into bruised parchment. And the terminal was on again, only this time no one was near it. I stood there in the doorway, watching the screen scroll again, but not down. Up, like someone was rewinding through decades of entries. Dates going backward. 2005, 1990, 1970, 1950. Eventually, it stopped. A new card popped up. Name, Marcus Elwood. Date, April 3rd, 1957. Subject, volunteer records, missing location. Last seen, 4th floor archives. Status, unresolved. That name. I didn't recognize it, but I did a search. On our microfilm database, the next day, there was one article, a library page. Age 17, went missing during a late shift. Last seen, shelving books on the 4th floor. Police never found a body. No signs of forced entry. His photo, a grainy black and white yearbook portrait, showed a thin, nervous-looking boy with a prominent widow's peak and glasses. The weirdest part. The computer terminal on the 4th floor wasn't installed until the 90s. That card entry should never have existed, but it got worse. Over the following weeks, other staff began reporting things. A janitor said he heard someone crying in the microfilm room. One of our assistants refused to go upstairs after she claimed she saw someone standing in the stacks, but the lights cast no shadow. Even patrons started complaining. A college kid came down white-faced one afternoon and told me there's a guy standing behind a terminal. I tried to ask him something, and he didn't move. He just stared at the screen. I asked him what the screen showed. He didn't remember, but he said it wasn't in English. Eventually, the higher-ups got involved. Drive, but the screen still flickers on some nights. The cleaning staff refuses to work past 8 p.m. on that floor now, and every so often I'll pass through and hear that soft, rhythmic click, like someone tapping the down arrow. One card at a time. They say libraries are keepers of knowledge, but sometimes they remember too much, and sometimes they catalog more than just books. I was hired as a children's librarian in the fall of 2011 at a mid-sized public library tucked in a quiet New England town. It was the kind of place that smelled like pencil shavings and laminate, with faded beanbag chairs under plastic trees, and a stage with puppet curtains nobody touched anymore. The building had a strange layout. The main adult section was modern, brightly lit and airy, but the children's wing sat in the oldest part of the library, a section that hadn't been fully renovated since the 1960s. It always felt colder over there. The floors creaked louder, the walls seemed tighter, and the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed just a bit too loud. The first thing I noticed my first week on the job was the locked door behind the picture book shelves. It looked like any maintenance closet, still gray, with a tarnished doorknob and no sign. But what made it strange was how new the lock was. Modern, card access, keypad, combo. The rest of the wing had old brass fixtures and creaky cabinets. This door felt like it had no business being there. I asked about it during a staff lunch. "Oh, that's just the old reading prep room," one of the senior librarians said too quickly. "We don't use it anymore." That was it. She didn't offer more, and the other staff changed the subject fast. The first time I truly noticed something was off was during one of our toddle story times. We'd just finished reading Where the Wild Things Are, and the kids were drawing monsters on construction paper. A boy maybe 4 stood up and stared toward the back of the room at that locked door. His expression changed, mouth slightly open, eyes wide. He started walking toward it slowly, ignoring me when I said his name. Then he raised his little hand and pointed. "She's whispering again," he said. "Who?" I asked. "The lady in the dark room." I felt ice in my spine. I crouched down to eye level and asked him to tell me what he meant. He just shook his head and sat back down, like nothing had happened. That same week, I started hearing clicks at night. When I stayed late to prepare materials or shelve books, the clicking would come from the back wall right behind the locked door. Rhythmic, deliberate ones. I even pressed my ear to the door. It stopped immediately when I backed away. I swear I heard a whisper, so soft I thought maybe it was just the blood rushing in my ears. But I wasn't the only one. One of the teens doing after-school volunteer hours came to me white as a sheet one day. She'd been re-shelving books near the back when she said she heard someone breathing on the other side of that door. Heavy, shaky. I told her it was probably HVAC. She didn't buy it. Neither did I. Eventually, I asked the building supervisor about the room. She got very quiet. Said she didn't have a key, that it was sealed off for safety reasons. But when I pushed harder, she wouldn't look me in the eye. Just told me, "Don't mess with it." That made me want to open it even more. So a few nights later, after closing, I tried something. I placed a small mirror flat on the ground, just outside the bottom edge of the door. Angled up, I wanted to see if any light or movement came through the gap underneath. After about 5 minutes, the mirror fogged up, like someone was breathing near the crack. I didn't sleep that night. I dug into the building's blueprints the next day, pretending to plan a reading nook redesign. The oldest files were from the 1950s. Back then, the room wasn't a closet at all. It was listed as a contemplation room, special needs child enclosure. No dimensions, no photos, just a note in red ink across the blueprint. Access restricted after 1966 incident. Door 2 remains sealed. Do not renovate. Board of Trustees. No one at the library would talk about it. I even emailed the local historical society. No reply, thought. Then the children started talking again. Different kids, different days. She's sad. She's in the dark. She wants me to come in. She says she's hungry. Every single time they'd be looking at the locked door. Then one night, the lock keypad lit up. I didn't touch it. I watched from across the room as the numbers blinked. 4, 2, 1, 1. The panel turned green. Click. The door opened 1 inch. Just enough to show pitch blackness. I bolted from the building and filed a report the next morning. Security reviewed the cameras, the footage. It cut out at exactly 11:11 p.m. for exactly 1 minute, then resumed. No one was visible. The door was closed. They dismissed it as a power issue. Said they'd secure it better. But the children still talk about her. Last week, a little girl whispered in my ear after story time. Okay, she wants a book. What kind of book? I asked. The girl smiled. Something with a girl who gets left behind. I worked the closing shift at our town's main public library for nearly 5 years. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it gave me peace. There was something calming about straightening chairs, logging late checkouts, and turning off one lamp at a time as darkness swallowed the stacks. The building was old, over 100 years, and had that unique scent of mildew, old paper, and faint lemon cleaner. But what I remember most is that it always felt like something was watching, even when I was alone, especially when I was alone. It was a Monday night near the end of February. A blizzard warning had emptied the town, and most of the staff left early. I volunteered to close. It was just me, the security guard, and the silence of shelves. At 8:57 p.m., the front doors were locked. I did a final walkthrough: fiction, nonfiction, the archive room, the bathrooms, the stairwell that led to the old microfiche, level no 1. Lights off. Everything normal, or so I thought. I was back at the front desk when I saw it. Movement on the security monitor camera 3. Pointed at the long hallway behind the second-floor reading room. There was someone standing in the hall. No coat, no bag. Just a figure, motionless. I blinked and looked again. He wasn't moving. I picked up the radio and buzzed Stan, our security guy. Hey, someone's still here. Second floor, back hall. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. So I did what I shouldn't have. I went up myself. I took the elevator and walked slowly down the main aisle. The whole floor was dark, except for the green exit signs, casting an eerie glow over the carpet. The hallway was ahead. I turned the corner. It was empty. I stopped, waited, listened. Just the hum of the HVAC and the faint creak of the building settling. Then a soft shuffling noise behind me. I spun around. Again, no one, but the lights behind meet of rows of fluorescents flickered off, like something had walked beneath them. I should have left right then, called someone, anyone. But curiosity is louder than caution. I crept back toward the hallway. This time, noticing something. Wrong. The books on the end cap weren't straight anymore. One sat angled out. I glanced at the title. Disappearance and Other Unsolved Cases. Odd choice for the history section. I pushed it back in and froze, because the moment my fingers touched the spine, I heard breathing. Not from behind, not from in front. From the shelf, I leaned down, staring through the space between the books, and I saw an eye, wide, unblinking, too close to the shelf. I backed away fast and knocked into a cart. The crash echoed like a gunshot, but when I looked again, the eye was gone. I ran down the hall, straight to the second-floor stairwell, and took the steps down 2 at a time. At the bottom, I turned the corner and saw the same man from the monitor, standing in the fiction aisle, just standing there, perfectly still. He looked ... off. Not dirty, not deranged, just wrong. He was too still, like a photograph. No blinking, no shifting weight, no breath, and even stranger, he was dressed in a vintage tweed coat, the kind people wore decades ago, and thick, round glasses that reflected the ceiling light too brightly. "Sir," I managed, "we're closed." He didn't respond. I took a cautious step closer. "Sir, how did you get in here?" Still nothing, and then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not angry either, just blank, a hollow grin that never reached his eyes. The kind of smile you'd see in an old wax museum. And then he turned away and walked slowly toward the back wall of the library. But instead of going around the end of the road, he kept walking right into the bookshelf. His body passed through it like fog. I sprinted back to the circulation desk and called security again. Still no response. I checked the monitors again. No figure, no stand, no movement at all. I checked the door logs. No one had come in or out since I locked up that night. I filed an incident report, but kept most of the truth to myself. The next morning, I found out something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The library had an old plaque in the archive room I'd never read before, dedicated to former staff. Near the bottom was a name I didn't recognize. Franklin, Ames head librarian, 1923 to 1944. May his endless search for knowledge continue. There was a photograph, black and white, a man in a tweed coat and round glasses. Same smile. That night, I had a dream. I was back at the library, wandering the stacks in total darkness. Somewhere in the rows, I could hear someone whispering my name. "Join me, ... I'm still cataloging." I don't work there anymore, but sometimes when I pass by after hours, I swear I see someone watching me through the second-story window, always smiling.